I guess we'll get started. Good afternoon and welcome to the Lee Bennett Hopkins Poetry Award for Children ceremony sponsored by the Pennsylvania Center for the Book. My name is Carla Schmidt. I'm the director of the center and administrator of this award. I have a few thank yous and some acknowledgements to make. First of all, we'd like to thank Barbara Dewey, Dean of the University Libraries and Scholarly Communications. Dean Dewey has provided tremendous support of the center and its initiatives during her tenure at Penn State, and we wish her well as she will soon be retiring. We'd like to thank the Pennsylvania Center for the Book team, who carries out the mission of the center. We're a small but mighty group. I'd also like to acknowledge Stephen Herb, the Director Emeritus of the center, and we'd like to especially thank him for saying yes about 28 years ago when Lee called him to say, or contacted him to say, I think we should have a poetry award for children. What do you think? So thank you to both Lee and Stephen for coming up with this fabulous idea of celebrating poetry. And a heartfelt and huge thank you to the estate of Lee Bennett Hopkins and its executor, Charles Ajita, for continuing the legacy of Lee and his many contributions to the field of children's literature, especially his passionate promotion of poetry in all of our lives, but especially in the lives of children. I have a little bit of a fun fact to share with all of you. With Kwame's 2015 Hopkins winning book, The Crossover, and now with this title this year, he becomes the second two-time winner of the Hopkins Award, joining the late Walter Dean Myers, who had 2 wins and 1 honor. We've had 2 poets who've had a win and 2 honors, Joyce Sidman and Naomi Shihab Nye. We've had a number of poets who have had a win and an honor, or 2 honors. However, the distinction of having the most Hopkins award-winning titles goes to Helen Frost, who has had 1 winning title and 3 honor books. So I'm a fan of trivia, and I love putting those little facts together. It's really fun to share with children those kinds of things. So I'd like to turn over the ceremony now to Marjorie Maddox-Hafer, who is the 2020 chair of the award. And I'd like to give a special thanks to she and the committee that she worked with, and thank them for all of their very careful reading of the 2019 titles. Marjorie?
Thank you so much, Carla. I'm delighted to be here today and to see Kwame kind of face to face. Wanted to start by talking a little bit about Lee. On August 8th, 2019, my husband and I were stuck at the Newark airport waiting for our flight to Germany, a flight that was canceled and rescheduled over 6 times before we finally boarded. A few hours into our long day of waiting, I received the heartbreaking news of Lee's death, there in that limbo of arrivals and departures, of trying to make it in this life from here to there. In shock, as many of us were, I paced up and down the airport corridor, past sub shops, bars, newspaper racks, coffee shops. At one point, I stopped at a small airport gift shop where I found a few flowing scarves with scenes of New York City, a few books. One of these books was Lee Bennett Hopkins' anthology, World Make Way, New Poems Inspired by Art from the Metropolitan Museum. As many of you know, Lee dedicated the book to Penn State's own Stephen Herb. In the midst of my sorrow and the airport's hubbub, I can't tell you what an unexpected solace finding this book became. Wherever you are, Lee's books will find you. I am so glad that Lee has generously made possible the Lee Bennett Hopkins Poetry Book Award, hoping so many children's books find their way to the people who need and love them. As Carla said, I'm Marjorie Maddox Hafer, an author and also a professor at nearby Lock Haven University of Pennsylvania. And I'd like to thank again Carla Schmidt, Caroline Wormuth for giving me this opportunity, and for the outstanding jury of judges, Michelle Bayuk, Bino Williams, Renee Rodriguez Astacio, and Junko Sequoia. What a privilege to work with such insightful and dedicated experts in their fields. Plus, we just had a lot of fun. So before we move to the excitement of the award itself, the judges and I would like to recognize our 2 honor books. So first we have Other Words for Home for Jasmine Wargo, and some of the comments from the judges. Jasmine Wargo's Other Words for Home calls all of us, Native and refugee alike, to examine, discuss, and reaffirm our own voices through what we hold dear and where we call home. Another one. This breathtaking verse novel untangles and weaves together the complexities of Jude, who deals with leaving home during the war in Syria and settling in the USA, while facing challenges related to family, language, culture, prejudice, and race. This sensitive story about resilience is a must read. Both of our honor books today take us on a journey toward home, acceptance, and celebration of community and self. Listen to this passage toward the end of Other Words from Home with our narrator and her brother. But somehow, despite the fact my brother has been in places where bombs have dropped, are dropping, in places where buildings have been reduced to ashy crumble, in places where no food and no water, he seems more at peace than I have ever seen him. You're doing it, I say, and he says the same thing back to me, and I'm not sure either of us really know what the it is, but we are okay with trying to figure it out. We are okay with still learning our lines because we are liking the script. Maybe, just maybe, we have both finally found roles that make sense to us, roles where we feel seen as we truly are. And our next honor book is You Are Home, an ode to the national parks, written and illustrated by Evan Turk. Some of the judges' comments. With powerfully lyrical language and gorgeous illustrations, You Are Home, an ode to the national park, sounds an inclusive message of welcome, hope, and affirmation, while celebrating the diverse habitats, creatures, and individuals of these United States. On many levels, this book is an inspiration in troubled times. Immersive illustrations and welcoming verses celebrate and affirm nature, heritage, and belonging in this ode to our national parks. Turk celebrates animals, landscapes, immigrants, indigenous groups, and families, and includes information about the national parks in later pages. This is a gorgeous book to be shared and read aloud together. So over and over again in these lyrical poems and brilliant illustrations, Evan Turk reminds us that we are home, that we are still home, and that we are all home. Wherever you are, in the national parks or claiming a house, a neighborhood, or a community as home, may these 2 important honor books reach you. I am so grateful that they have found us. And now for Kwame Alexander, poet extraordinaire, and one of this country's most engaging and persuasive ambassadors of poetry. Wherever you are, believe me, Kwame Alexander will make sure that poetry finds you. A few years ago, I sat with thousands of others in a large packed auditorium at a university in Michigan. With his inspiring poetry journey, Kwame mesmerized us all. A year later, I was speaking at a college in Indiana. The buzz was everywhere. Kwame Alexander and his poetry bus were on the road. They were headed to that campus, and in a few days, let me tell you, there was dancing between the library shelves. And no wonder. Poet, educator, and New York Times bestselling author of over 29 books, I think it's 30 now with this new book, Kwame is the recipient of numerous awards, including the Coretta Scott King Author Honor, 3 NAACP Image Award nominations, and the 2017 inaugural Conroy Legacy Award. His book, The Undefeated, illustrated by Kadir Nelson, won the 2020 Caldecott Medal, the 2020 Coretta Scott King Illustrator Award, and was also deemed a 2020 Newbery Honor Book. And as Carla mentioned, Kwame is no stranger to the Lee Bennett Hopkins Poetry Award, having won in 2015 for his basketball novel in verse, The Crossover, which also won the 2015 Newbery Award. His writing workshop, The Right Thing, the literary variety talk show, Bookish, his poetry bus and tours. Yes, wherever you are, Kwame Alexander will make sure that poetry finds you. And now for this year's award, the judges and I went through many, many rounds of voting, and yet every single time on every single list was Kwame Alexander's How to Read a Book, illustrated by the amazing Melissa Sweet. And Melissa also, I wanted to mention, she's an illustrator of over 100 books and twice recipient of the Caldecott Honor Medal, as well as a best-selling author herself. And you'll see some of her illustrations in a minute. So comments from the judges. Open the pages of Kwame Alexander's How to Read a Book and taste the irresistible allure of words. In this poetry for the palate, the author takes you page by page through the joys of reading. Melissa Sweet's captivating and complex collage illustrations and visual appetizers, desserts, and midnight snacks as you discover treat after added treat along the way. Get ready for a feast. Your eyes and ears will thank you. And one more. Elegant, imaginative, and enticing, Kwame Alexander's lush poetry is brought alive by Melissa Sweet's neon-colored collages, and both blend into an exhilarating experience that reminds us of the intricacies and delights of how to read a book. This is one to be read and relished over and over again, word by word, morsel by morsel. And while I'm very much looking forward to Kwame taking us inside how to read a book, I can't resist showing you a few glimpses of the layers upon layers of creativity, discovery, and collage inspiration brought together by these two artists. So there's this and this. And lots of places where both the words and images flip and unfold. So this page flips out to the poetry bus. And this beautiful illustration in words, and squeeze every muscle of each plump line until the last drop of magic drips from the infinite sky. Truly magical. And places where the words and images just explode. And here's the ending. Don't rush through, and really don't rush through this book. Don't rush through. Your eyes need time to taste. Your soul needs room to bloom. Now sleep, dream, hope. You never reach the end.
Aww.
Here we are back with Kwame. So let me just stop sharing my screen. All right. And wherever you are in Zoomville today, may this book find and inspire you the way it has us. On behalf of the jury of judges and the Pennsylvania Center for the Book, it is my great pleasure to award the 2020 Lee Bennett Hopkins Poetry Book Award to Kwame Alexander and illustrator Melissa Sweet for How to Read a Book. Maybe we can all just clap.
Thank you. This is, wow. I am I'm just so honored, and I should probably change this to speaker. How's that? Um, I don't know how you want to do this, Alyssa. I guess I'm talking now. Um, so look, thank you to Penn State. Thank you to Carla and Caroline. Thank you to the judges, to the jury, to Marjorie and Michelle and Bina and everyone. I'm just so honored and grateful and thankful for this award and this honor. I want to thank the writers and the creative folks who are around me day in and day out, my team. I want to thank Angel and Cass and Ariel and Mary and Carmen and Randy, who are constantly developing and creating and supporting and encouraging. In fact, you all, here's a bit of trivia, because I know Carla likes trivia.
Mm-hmm.
There will be a how to write a poem book. And I'm writing that with a friend named Deanna Nikaido. And there will be a how to sing a song book. And I'm writing that with my guitarist friend, Randy Preston. So we're kind of making this a little bit of a series. So perhaps there will be some other awards in the future. And they're all going to be published by HarperCollins, but more importantly, they're all going to be illustrated by Melissa Sweet.
Oh, how nice.
How cool is that? Like, that's exciting. So let me just tell you all a little bit about how this book came to be. It was back in 2000, maybe 10, so 10 years ago. And I was the poetry ambassador for Lit World, which is an organization that promotes literacy around the world and produces literacy programs and projects in developing nations and communities and villages. So they were having their annual gala, and the New York Daily News had decided they were going to promote this gala, promote Lit World for an event called World Read Aloud Day. And so the executive director of Lit World asked me, as the poetry ambassador, to write a poem honoring or celebrating World Read Aloud Day. And it would be published in the Daily News. And I was like, cool. So I wrote 3 poems because I was so excited. I had so many ideas. And so I wrote 3 different poems and I sent them to Pam Allen, who was the director. And I said, here you go, choose one. Now, of course, I had one poem that I loved. And I had another poem that I was like, it's okay. And then the third poem was probably not that good in my mind. Pam chose the poem that wasn't that good in my mind. Oh my goodness. She chose a poem that I wasn't really feeling. And so eventually I kind of got into it, because when I say I wasn't feeling it, y'all, it was a decent poem. It just wasn't my favorite. I should say that, okay? So it ended up getting published in the Daily News. The poem I loved was How to Read a Book, but it didn't get published. So I called a friend of mine, a librarian. Most of my friends are librarians, y'all. Librarians have made my career. My parents were my first librarians. So I called a librarian friend of mine at the Loudoun County Public Library in Loudoun County, Virginia. She's no longer there. She was the youth services, the head of youth services. She's now retired in Maine. Her name is Linda Holtzlander. I called Linda and I said, I got this poem. I know National Library Week is coming up. Why don't you use my poem for like some kind of promotions? Because I love the poem. So she put the poem on a poster on a really large poster. She printed thousands of copies. It had a clementine. It was a beautifully designed poster. And my poem was there. I sent a poem to Nikki Giovanni, a poster to Nikki Giovanni. I sent posters to a bunch of my friends. I put a poster on my daughter's wall. I framed it because I love that poem. Okay, so that was 2011 then. So we started at 2010, then went to 2011. Now, in the meantime, I'm writing a book about two boys who play basketball. And they have this loving family. And nobody's interested in the book. So that's some context that I'm writing that while all this other stuff is going on. So my agent sets up meetings for me at different publishers. So I'm in New York, it's 2011, late 2011. I'm meeting with publishers and I meet with Alvina Ling at Little Brown, right? And so I'm sitting there and I'm telling her about this basketball novel that I wrote that I love, that I think is going to be the next biggest thing. And she's like, yeah, okay, that's kind of interesting. We do have another basketball novel we're about to publish, Kwame. And you know how publishers are. If they have one book that they're about to publish on mango milkshakes, then if you come up with a book on mango milkshakes, publishers are going to be like, nah, we can't publish your book because we have another book on mango milkshakes. Like, what? Doesn't even make sense. But I get it. That's how publishing is. So Alvina Ling, she said, maybe that basketball book, which sounds interesting, is not for us. But Kwame, do you have anything else? Now, to give you some more context. Okay, let's do a quick aside. When you're telling stories on Zoom in this sort of pandemic virtual world that we're embracing, you don't get the feedback from the audience. You don't get the energy, which is something I crave, y'all. So if y'all want to turn on your cameras at some point and just smile, I appreciate all the people who are posting the emojis. That helps. But right now, basically, I'm listening to myself and I'm trying to get myself psyched up. Oh, Cass, I see. Oh, thanks, Siri. Thanks, Katie. Yeah, that's helpful. See? Dana, Barbara, Dewey, Dean Dewey. I got to call you Dean Dewey. Thank you for making all this happen. No, Dean. Tara, Amanda. Okay, that's helpful. Thanks for the emoji, Nicole. Tanya, Colette. Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm feeling good. Now, where was I in the story? That's the question. So Alvina Ling says, do you have anything else that you'd like to get published? So I'm like, this is my opportunity. I'm sitting with this amazing editor at Little Brown who has a storied reputation, who I really dig, and I've got this opportunity to pitch her another book. But I don't really have anything else that I've been working on. So she says, well, do you have anything else? And I say, yes, because y'all know my favorite word is yes. So I said yes. And she said, well, what is it? And I said, it's a picture book. And she said, well, what is it about? I said, it's a picture book that's a poem, and it's called How to Read a Book. And she said, ooh, I like that. Do you happen to have it? Could you share it? And I was like, yes. And I got my phone, Katie, and I pulled it up on Dropbox, and I read the poem to her, and she was floored. And she was like, I think that's it. And I was like, okay, we're on to something. So then over the next couple months, she was like, well, maybe it's a collection of poems that are about books, or maybe it's this. And it didn't work out. Like most things in publishing don't work out, but she had really given me this opportunity to explore this. So then I told my agent, I want to sell this How to Read a Book as a picture book. So she sent it out to other publishers. And HarperCollins, Phoebe Ye, the editor, who was Walter Dean Meyer's editor. See how we're coming full circle, Carla?
Absolutely, yes.
Phoebe Ye was Walter Dean Meyer's, God rest his soul. She was his editor. And so she said, yeah, I like how to read a book. We're going to make you an offer, so we'll publish it. So, oh, I see Randy Preston is entering the room. If Randy has his guitar, y'all, we may have to make him play a song. Anyway, so the book, we get a book deal for how to read a book. And it's going to be published. And we're 3 years later since I wrote the poem, and everything's feeling great. So, these picture books take about 2 years to get done. So this is 2012 now, so it's probably going to come out in 2014. So the editor, Phoebe Ye, who I love, who had published my novel, she sends me a note one day and she says, Kwame, sorry to tell you this, but I'm leaving HarperCollins. What? What in the world? I can't win for losing. She's leaving. Now, here's the thing, people. Elisa, I love your emojis. You're hilarious. Here's the thing, people. When an editor leaves the publishing company, what that means is all that editor's projects are going to be given to someone else who probably could care less about those projects. Fortunately, she gave the project to her assistant, Jess, who had got promoted to an assistant editor. Jess is no longer in publishing. She was dynamic. Anyway, to make a long story even longer, they sent me a list of illustrators and they said, who do you want to work with? And in my mind, it was Melissa Sweet. From day one, I can say that earnestly, honestly, authentically. It was Melissa Sweet. Okay, so hold on. Yeah, so they contacted Melissa Sweet. She wasn't available. She loved the book, but she was not available. And she said, if you all can wait a while, maybe. And we were like, nah. Or the publisher was like, nah. So then they sent me some other illustrators. And I was like, well, let's go with a debut illustrator. Let's give somebody an opportunity because this is my opportunity. Now, context, the crossover had just come out around all this. Okay? So the crossover had come out. And librarians weren't reading it because you all said it was about basketball and you weren't interested. But a funny thing happened, Carla. All your boys and your girls in your library started reading it, and then librarians were like, wait a minute, what's this book all these kids are reading and fighting over? So we choose an illustrator from, I want to say he was from Israel, and he was talented, and he was a debut. And they said, Kwame, do we have your approval? And I was like, yeah, you have my approval. And so over the next year, 2 things happened. This illustrator did sketches for the whole book, and they sent them to me. Simultaneously, I won the Newbery. Okay? So the illustrations came back to me, the sketches, and Cindy, those illustrations, how shall I say this? Randy's probably like, Kwame, just be careful how you say it. All right. The illustrations were not up to par. The sketches were not to my liking. Okay, I'll say that. And so I wrestled with what to do. And so I contacted HarperCollins and I said, look, y'all, these illustrations aren't working for me. And I gave them a list of issues with them. And they had paid the guy and everything. This is probably way too much information for y'all, but I want to give y'all the backstory on this book because the idea was I wanted to write a poem to celebrate books. I wanted to write a poem to show kids, to show us what happens when you can't put a book down, when it's unputdownable, how books have transformed my life, how they can transform our lives, how we can just sort of become immersed. So this was a love story to what happened between the pages of a book. It meant a lot to me. I was not going to just accept anything. So I told him these illustrations aren't working. So then the publisher of Harper, Rosemary, who I love dearly, she says, Kwame, maybe we can have him fix it. And I was like, my mother was an English teacher, y'all. She was like, she was always telling me to use correct grammar. I said to Rosemary, ain't no fixing this. And I felt bad because I had approved this guy and they were like, well, Kwame, we've already paid it. We paid the guy. We can't now go back and change the illustrator and take it away from him. And here's where I got a little, Carl, are you taking pictures? Oh Lord. See, this is what happens when you let people into your show. This is what happens. She's taking pictures of us. Mary Napoli, chat with her, talk to her. Okay, anyway, so this is where winning the Newbery Dean Dewey kind of helps. So I said, look, you all, we have an opportunity here to really make this book jump off the page, to put it on the stage for kids, to bring words alive. But we need an illustrator who's going to, at the least, equal what I've done with the words. And so they went back and they had these meetings and they thought about it and they came back. And I do realize that it was kind of audacious of me to ask them to pull this illustrator after they had already paid him and I had approved it. I did see the sort of hypocrisy or the contradictions or the issue, but I also knew what the book needed. And I knew ultimately that it didn't need that kind of illustration. So they emailed me back and they said, and I even offered to help pay for some of the new illustrator, which I'm glad they didn't accept because Melissa Sweet cost a fortune. Thank goodness. Woo! So I see you laughing, Cass. So they called back and they said, we're going to do it. We're going to find another illustrator. Who do you have in mind? Melissa Sweet. So they called her. And by this time, you all, like a couple years had passed. So now she had time and she agreed to do it. I was in Palm Beach for the Palm Beach Book Festival with the Poetry Bus. It was me and Randy, and they sent me Melissa Sweet's sketches. And I just sat in my hotel and I cried. Because that was it. She did more than I did with the words. She created a whole nother story. If you all look deep within that book, and I know that you judges have because you awarded it, she has a whole nother thread going through there featuring a fawn and Bambi. And she has a poem by Nikki Giovanni that uses the fawn metaphor. I guess she knew that Nikki Giovanni is like my mother. She never asked me that. So the book comes out. There's another story in here that was really sort of we almost didn't do the book. It was me and Melissa against HarperCollins, but that'll have to be for another award because we're running out of time. But it's an even better story. So the book comes out. We do a little tour together. She and I have conversations together, live events, and then she tells me she says, you got to come visit me because I know you go visit Ashley Bryan on Little Cranberry Isle. I'm in Portland. I know you got to drive through Portland, so you should come visit me. So the book's been out for a couple months, and then the summer, it's the summer of 2019? And I'm going to visit Ashley at his house in Little Cranberry. And I call her and say, we're coming through Portland. And she said, well, you have to come over for dinner. What do you want? Ashley Bryan was the very first Lee Bennett Hopkins Award winner. How cool is that? I couldn't have written this better. This is what happens when things are aligned. So Melissa says, stop by the house, we'll have dinner. What do you want? I'm going to Maine. What do I want? Tell me what I want, y'all. We're going to Maine. Yeah, Carmen, I want lobster. Right, Alyssa, I want lobster. So we get to Melissa's house. It's a beautiful house. You can imagine how Melissa Sweet's house looks. It's just artistic and spacious and a lot of books, a lot of art. And I walk in and she's got these huge lobster roll sandwiches. And she's got these French fries. She didn't make the French fries, lobster. She didn't make the French fries, she bought them from someplace. And so the French fries are amazing. The lobster, I eat 2 big sandwiches, y'all. We're drinking wine. We're talking. She says Daniel Mentor wants, if you want to stop by and see him, he lives down the street. So Daniel Mentor won a Caldecott honor. Pretty acclaimed fine artist. Anyway, so we're talking, and she says, Kwame, I know you have your imprint Versify. We should do something. I should do something for Versify. And I'm like, you should do something for Versify. So then we're having this talk, and y'all, I gotta tell y'all, I feel like it's like Langston Hughes and Maya Angelou having a talk, or it's like Picasso and Frida Kahlo. We're just 2 artists hanging out, drinking wine, talking all this literary, just love. And then she takes me upstairs to her art studio. And her art studio, y'all, it's like a playhouse. It's professional, it's childlike, it's white space, it's colorful, there's a couch to nap in. I mean, and then she took me back to where she keeps her original artwork in these cabinets. Now here's where I'm probably gonna cry. She says, pick one. And that's really why I want to dedicate this award to the woman who introduced me to the power of words, the power of art, the beauty of it, the joy of it, my mother. May she rest in soul. And to this beautiful, brilliant chef who makes the best lobster rolls ever, Melissa Sweet. Thank you all for this honor. Thank you for sending the clock to my father. Thank you for the $1,000. Thank you for recognizing just a kid who grew up with poetry and who had a copy of Please Pass the Poetry by Bennett Hopkins when he was 4 years old. Thank you for this. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kwame. We so appreciate all of your wonderful words and hearing about how this book came to be. It went through quite a process. Crazy, all of these connections. It's absolutely wonderful. We love hearing the stories. And I hope that all of you enjoyed this time together. And Kwame, enjoy every day. And I hope you have lots of great writing moments and visiting with lots of other people and sharing poetry internationally, right? Yeah, awesome. And if the rest of you would love to like us on Facebook, that would be awesome. At the Pennsylvania Center for the Book, we post all kinds of literary events that are happening in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And I know that you would love to take part in some of them. Most of them are virtual these days because of the circumstances we find ourselves in. So there's lots of great opportunities out there, I guess, to enjoy the arts. And thank you everyone for coming today, and especially Kwame for joining us.